Welcome, everyone. I'm here today with Bill Miller, who's the author of What Every CEO Must Know. And we're going to be having a chat about the book. And he's also written a book called The Rookie CEO, which I haven't got a copy of, which, having read this one, I'm actually quite interested to read the other one as well. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
So you said in your introduction, you said that even the smallest blind spot can jeopardize the biggest vision. What's the blind spot you see most often that leaders don't recognise until it's too late?
Oh, there are too many of them to count. Um, I think that the one that's not really in the book, which I'll just kind of add some more narratives, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that every CEO has imposter syndrome at one point or another, and
Mm.
they put on a big front in front of their people, and a lot of that is ego, and they think they know everything, or they think they can handle anything, but then they go home, they're driving home or flying home or whatever it is they do, or even lying in bed or taking a shower, and they say, how am I going to handle that tomorrow?
Mm.
Because they don't really have a good structure, they don't really have a good process. I'd say 80% of CEOs are seat of the pants type leaders. The other 20% are very structured, really understand what they're doing, but the other 80% have blind spots, and even the most tiny blind spot. And we talk about some of them in the book, like not having a plan B. It's like you can take a company down by a simple blind spot that you don't even think is a blind spot. I got this under control. I got this covered. I can handle that situation. I can handle this situation. And it's really not true. So that's kind of my thought. The imposter syndrome I don't really write about, but I'll tell you what, I've been running into that more and more with people telling me I put on a great front, but I get home and I just don't know what I'm going to do the next day.
I remember going to a conference many years ago when imposter syndrome was first being discussed as a thing, and the person who was presenting asked for a show of hands in the room as to who had experienced it, and probably three-quarters of the room put their hand up. So it's one of those things I think it's really common with senior leaders. And it's hard to admit because it's that sort of sense of I got to where I am because I'm smart and capable and people are relying on me, and therefore it's very difficult to sit back and go, actually, I haven't got it all together.
Right. In the book vernacular, probably the biggest blind spot that I can see and that I've experienced in all of my years of being in the seat, having a seat at the table, being at the board meetings, either working directly with or for these CEOs or myself, is delaying decisions. There are multiple reasons for that. Sometimes the CEO doesn't believe in something and just says, I don't really care. And so they just ignore it. And it's really delaying decisions, maybe from a partner, an investor, or a senior leadership team member that's brought something to you. Sometimes it's somebody who has a great new business idea. They've done a complete pro forma P&L, they've done a plan all on their own time. And they bring it to you and you say, nah, I don't believe in that. And that's probably happened over the last few years with AI, where people bring a suggestion in to the CEO and the CEO just doesn't believe in it or doesn't buy it right now. We don't need it right now. We're doing so well. Business is great. We got all of it. And they don't even explore it. They just kind of delay any decisions about it. They might take a long time to delay decisions by asking for more information. I once wrote a blog, it's on my TMC blog, CEO Insights, 23 ways to say no. So CEOs have their own way to say no to somebody, not right now, I'm not really interested, or let's go collect more data on it. Those are probably the absolute biggest blind spot killers, in my opinion, that I do cover in the book, and there's many examples.
Mm. Yeah, it is a challenge, isn't it? And I think sometimes the pace of business gets in the way as well. It's like I actually don't have the bandwidth to think that through or to explore it in any detail. So it's easier to just sort of say, let's park it, let's circle back to that at a later time. And I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors in business with the pace of life. The pace, it's very frantic at the moment. Everybody seems to be on all the time. And I don't know that CEOs necessarily get enough space to really sort of do the thinking.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm sure that that's a fact across the board, and a very large percentage of CEOs experience that.
Mm. So in the book, you structure around the chapters around what happened, why it happened, recovery and lesson, and so on. When you look across all the stories, and not necessarily all the stories in the book, but also the stories from your consulting life as well, what pattern surprises you the most?
The commonality across industries doesn't matter if it's a first time CEO, a founder CEO, or a stuck CEO that's been around for years. They all have similar situations like delaying decisions, like poor decision making process, things that let the culture in a company go, like minor things occur within a company and they just let it go. And so the culture tends to follow.
Mm.
Um, I'm a believer that whether you're in the office or remote or hybrid, people watch and listen to everything you do and everything you say. Words are so important. Words matter. Your behavior matters. And people will mimic you. And that's something that is common across every place I've ever been. And I'm talking before I was in leadership, as I thought back over all the years, to all the years I've been in leadership, which is roughly 35 or more. And you just experience it. And then when I run into especially first time CEO clients, and I only take on two at a time because I'm semi-retired, but I like to write and I do consulting, and now I'm doing a startup, which is crazy at my age. But the fact is that it happens all the time, and I see it time after time. And so you see these same types of mistakes made. When I came up with the concept of the Ricky CEO, the first book, I just wanted to share stories. I really didn't think about being an author. I didn't think about making it a second career. I just wanted to share things that actually happened because I thought they were bizarre in many
Mm.
cases. And then as I went through that, I started to realize that there are some common points, which is how I came up with this concept of PPLC. What makes up a CEO? We all know what the attributes of leaders are and the types of leaders, the servant leaders and authoritarian leaders. All of that stuff is pretty common and well written about. But I came up with a first time CEO, of which I worked for 9 in a row. They what the philosophy that they bring to their first CEO role is built by their path to CEO. When they were a kid and growing up through school and going to class, and were they the captain of the football team or a baseball team? Did they just sit back and watch everybody else and follow? Or did they grow up in a family that the parents both worked and were executives, and the parents decided they were going to a top school and they were going to be a CEO and they're going to groom them for that? All of those things contribute to what this first time CEO is going to be. And they build a philosophy, and the philosophy builds leadership style, and that's all based on every decision that they've made in their life, really. Think about every major decision you made as a crossroads. If you go this way, you could become a doctor. If you go this way, you become a lawyer. Or if you go the way I went, you're going to be a techie in technology for 5.5, almost 6 decades. It's the decisions you make at some point in your life. Can you change them? Of course you can. But we all make those, and that's what drives the philosophies you bring to the party. So that was the first book. And then I learned a lot about people having a seat at the table and being at every board meeting, being at a Silicon Valley Tier 1 funded startup. Boy, did I figure out a lot of stuff really fast. So then when you start to, I have a lot of friends, which are in people that I've worked with, and I consider them friends now, but they're really people that I've worked with that are in the second book that were willing to share a story. And as I was planning to write the second book, I originally had the title, The Top Mistakes CEOs Make, the top 77 mistakes CEOs make. How could they have avoided it? How did they recover from it, if they recovered? And how did they move forward? And what was the biggest takeaway from that? And that's how I started. And then I started interviewing the CEOs, some of the ones that are in the book, Tony Lewis, Gary Lee. As I interviewed them and I put my notes together, and I would interview on Zoom, or I had a questionnaire, a HubSpot form that people could fill in with that information. As I wrote each chapter, wanting every story to be a chapter, they were like 1,000 words. And I said, I'm not writing a 77,000 word nonfiction book. So I'm not going to have 77 chapters. So I kind of brought it back down, and I came up with the framework for the book of there's the strategic part, the communications part, the startup founder part, the people, several chapters that actually cross multiple chapters. So I had to find a home for them, and I tried to put them in logical order. But when you hear the stories from these people and how they made the decision and how they could have avoided it, I found it remarkable. And so many learnings could be available to other first time CEOs and founders, or somebody who is stuck, that can help them accelerate their time through their CEO role. I mean, think about the decades that have been invested in all of these CEOs that are in my book, all real people, live stories. About 25 of them are told directly to me through a Zoom or a form. And then, of course, I would follow up with, I would write the chapter, follow up, and have a phone call or a Zoom call. Zoom call. Sometimes they said, "How did you write this from what I told you?" And I just said, it's experience really, because when you do sit, at the table, you see it live, you see how it goes down. And I've always followed body language, and you can tell when somebody's putting on a show and when somebody really doesn't know what they're talking about and they're making it up on the fly. So I tried to make this book a great reference book for people to be able to go to any of the chapters. Just if you're on a plane, you can read a few chapters if you're not a speed reader, because it is 300 and some odd pages. It's not a 2 hour read unless you're a speed reader. The first book was a 2 hour read by read, but at the end of the day, there's a lot to take away from this book. So that's how I came up with the concept, and
I
hopefully
think
that helps.
I think the fact that they're real stories are really helpful to people too, because as we were talking earlier about this, I don't necessarily want to admit that things aren't going well for me. Having a story of a real person where you can read it and relate to it and go, actually, that person has experienced exactly what I'm going through, moves it from its theory, and maybe I'm doing the theory wrong, into I can actually see other people have done it. So I think it breaks down the barrier of needing to know everything, I guess.
I, I I've worked with some of the smartest people in the world that do have degrees from Harvard and Yale and Stanford. They don't know everything. They might think they do, but believe me, they don't. And I've seen some pretty incredible mistakes made that are preventable. All you had to do is breathe. If the CEO just took a breath,
Mm,
sat back and relaxed and said, okay, what's wrong with this picture? What mistakes am I making with my team? And how can I make everybody around me better?
mm,
And you just take that time to understand the tidbits. We were just talking a little while ago about how there's no bandwidth, but you have to reserve time for yourself to be able to really sit back and prevent some of those mistakes. And you can do it if you think it through. And so I started my career as a software developer back in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And so I used to write flowcharts. To this day, I still write flowcharts. because it's one way to take a look at my decision trees.
Mm.
And there are people who still do it. A lot of it, you can see LinkedIn articles where people start. In fact, I saw a nice one this morning on AI compliance because this is a big area right now of question. And there's a lot of different perspectives on it. And there's CEO perspectives on it, and then there's employee perspectives on it, right? The shadow AI going on, and people trying to make policies, and how do I use it, and all that. And I've noticed that the technical side people use flowcharts. If
Mm.
this, then that. If this, then that. But a lot of CEOs that don't come from the technical background, they're former product managers, they're former financial CFOs or controllers or whatever, depending on where they come from in their business, they may or may not use decision making tools. So I do a lot, there's a lot of decision frameworks, many ones that I've used over my career and that the CEOs that I know use. And these are things that can really help you. You can use
Mm.
any framework, just come up with one that's consistent and you teach it to your team. Let your team understand how you're making those decisions. You'll build a better culture. You'll build a lot of trust, and it'll be a whole lot easier for everybody, especially yourself.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. I remember a CEO that I coached years ago now, and the first thing he said to me when I went to his office for the first coaching session is he said, "There's something you need to know about me, Ros, and that is that I'm always right. Even when I'm wrong, I'm right." And you do talk about overconfidence in your book, overconfidence in plan A. So at what point does confidence in a strategy start to tip over into being dangerous?
Overconfidence, of course, is number one, of which we talk about in chapter 3. But ego is big. When the ego is too big to fit through the door, and you forget to leave it there. When you don't listen and process that information, I call it hearing and listening. So if you can listen, but if you don't process that information, you just lose it all, and you're missing out on something. I think that's where confidence kind of goes out the door. People will ask you some questions and you don't know the answer, and somebody might have given you that answer or something about it, and you don't know. Said, well, I didn't know about that. But we just talked about it in a meeting. It's like you start to lose confidence of your team. Confidence, like the CEO that you coached, that's, I bet you that person, that CEO went home with imposter syndrome many nights during the course of his or her CEO career because they're not really right. And they know they're not right. And they know that they need help to get the answer. The question is, how do they do it? You have to build a culture around a feedback loop, creating a safe space for people to share information with you, and you're not going to fire them if they're true. I mean, I've had to look somebody in the face and say, the biggest problem here is you and your communication style.
Mm.
And I've seen this over and over in meetings. Confident CEO sits at the table, has a staff meeting, and says, I want this. Nobody responds except for one person in the meeting. And I can remember back, this one engineering head is the only one who asked questions back. Is this what you mean? No. I wrote about this in both books, actually. The fact is that until you get interlock with your people, you don't, where they understand what you've actually asked for, you're going to have misses. And that's a communication style, that's a leadership style, and it leads to mistakes and failure and the people losing confidence in you. So those there's two levels of confidence here. There's your own as a leader, and then there's confidence that your team has in you. The book is really about your confidence as a CEO. And to me, confidence can deliver power, which is the execution part. Now, I've since expanded, since I published this book last year in October, November. Um, my next book is going to include two more dimensions. There's confidence and power, but there's clarity and resilience, because it's really confidence is driven by clarity, the resilience that you build, which is constantly bouncing back. You get knocked down and you come back. Together, they all deliver the execution, which is the power that you'll have as a leader. I'm bringing AI in as well as the four dimensions, and that's kind of what I'm working on for my next book.
Mm.
And I work with my clients on that very thing, and I get a way to test it, both on myself in a startup and with a couple of clients that I've had for a few years. So these are things that I really enjoy these whole concept of how are CEOs going to continue to lead in the next era. And we're going through huge changes right now. Even though the fundamentals of leadership will never change, how you execute those fundamentals is changing. How do you use AI? How do you leverage AI? I mean, if you just use AI to make decisions, you're just going to make the wrong decisions faster.
Yeah.
You have to figure, and then you can go down faster. So there's all kinds of different approaches right now, and that's kind of what I'm working on. So hopefully that helps answer that
Mm.
question.
I love your description there of what confidence looks like to you, that sort of, strength of commitment, resilience, and so on. And that's what separates real confidence from that sort of artificial imposter syndrome type of confidence. And it can be quite difficult looking at it from the outside to tell which is which sometimes. But, obviously for the person, it feels very, very different. So I love that you're going to be exploring that in the next book. So can't wait for that one to come out as well.
Mhm.
Now, you talk about startups not failing from lack of ideas, but when execution actually outpaces leadership maturity. So, what does that look like?
Oh boy. Yeah, I've seen this one over and over again too. So when you hire the right people, and as you've read in the book and you have questions about this, a lot of people don't hire the right people. But let's say you hire really good people in general, and they're moving ahead, and the engineering team comes to you as CEO and says, I need to have these new tools. And the QA and test team comes to the CEO and says, I need this test equipment. And everybody brings to you their request. The sales team wants changes to the CRM. The marketing and team is generating leads, putting them in the CRM, but the sales isn't doing anything with them. You have all kinds of things like this, and the team is moving fast, but the CEO can't make the decisions. And so
Mm.
the company is scaling properly, or at least the right direction, the right vector, but the CEO's going, what do I do first? The prior what are the priorities? Even the team doesn't know the priorities. They're all coming to the CEO, so the company is moving ahead, but the CEO now is a bottleneck because
Mm.
there's a lot of money being spent there. Even if money was budgeted, and I remember even in the startup days we budgeted money, especially really surprisingly the Silicon Valley startup in the early days, and I was employee number 8 there, so I was there in the third week of the company, and everybody wanted to spend money back then. We had to develop a budget because everybody was asking for money.
Mm.
It's like, even though we raised a lot of money, it doesn't mean that you have it all to spend. So,
Mm.
because there's you got a run rate that you got to be careful of running out of money. But at the end of the day, the company is moving ahead. Delayed decisions and too much information for the bottleneck for the CEO is the company now is outpacing the CEO. And
Mm.
this it happens more often than not. And it may not be for those reasons. That's just a perfect example that I've seen in multiple companies, different CEOs, different levels of experience. They still run and still. And then every day now, these people are saying, when are you going to sign that capital equipment request for me? When are you going to let me buy this? When are you, and it's just constant battle.
Mm.
And that's a great example of a company, and especially in startup areas, because startups, people move fast, they wear multiple
Mm.
hats, and people need the tools to move forward. And today the tools are AI tools mostly
Mm.
because of the structure of teams are looking so different. An AI agent is replacing different types of people, maybe a coder. Maybe you have three coders instead of 10, and you have seven agents. I mean, I'm just making those numbers up because it varies by company and complexity, but that's the type of thing that is happening. And then there's going to be all these new jobs which are managing the agents. But at the end of the day, it's still the company's growing faster than the CEO is capable of handling.
Mm. And that bottleneck, I mean, I've seen that happen in startups as well. And sometimes it's lack of structure. Sometimes it is just the CEO getting in everybody's way because they can't let go. It's that this is my baby. I need to be in charge of everything. I need to sign everything off. I need to make all of the decisions. And the company gets to a certain size and they just simply can't do that anymore.
Yeah, so there's a slippery slope, right?
Mm.
So in the book, in both books, I talk a little bit about the signature authority. In one, and somebody in, I think the review of the first book, somebody said, what CEO would give up signature authority? But I've seen it happen twice. So when you have a first time CEO, a rookie CEO, who is not really great at the numbers and just doesn't want to even look at them, and he lets the CFO sign off on everything. Now you've completely lost control.
Mm.
And now there's a different bottleneck. Instead of the CEO being the bottleneck, the CFO is a bottleneck, but the responsible party is the CEO. So that's
Mm.
another example of that I write about and how it actually did destroy a company. And it destroyed a very well funded, great startup. And I was smart enough to leave on my own before the thing went down. But it
Mm.
happened, and there was money embezzled because this guy had signature authority. Those kinds of things can happen. However, you when the first time CEO is building the team, building the culture, you have to build these levels of trust, and you have to delegate with discipline. And I write a lot about delegation. You had prepped a couple of questions about delegation. There's delegating too fast and too much. There's delegating with discipline, which is what I support. And this is, you have to teach people how you think and how you make your decision. Again, this is the decisioning process so that you can delegate and not micromanage. Because this is the problem. The guy who doesn't want to let go, the CEO, man or woman, doesn't want to let go because number one, they know they can do better than a lot of other people. Maybe if it's their business function background, sales or engineering, whatever it is. But you still have to train people, educate people, and give them small tasks so that you build trust between each other and you know they can get it done and just and then coach them. It's the coaching part that goes with CEOs that a lot of them don't know how to do. They have to develop that skill set. One way to develop it is to hire your own coach, as you probably know because you've done this. You teach them how to coach their people. And that's how you teach people to delegate, in my opinion. And
Mm.
I have a thing called the takeover, which is one of my favorite delegation mistakes. You don't really care about something, you don't think it's going to be successful. Lead might come in from a trade show and you discount it, or somebody calls out of the blue, but they're really interested in what you got. And then, so you give it to somebody to go and run with it. But you don't really care much about it until it gets hot.
Mm.
And then you take over and tell the other person, sales or business development, don't worry about it anymore. I got this covered. And then you don't even give that person commission
Mm.
when the thing is successful. Now, I've seen this multiple times. I don't like it. That salesperson or BD person did all the heavy lifting, meeting after meeting, to get people on board with your solution. And then just because it becomes successful and might be big, you take it over because you're the king. Doesn't work. It fails every single time. that is a delegation, a reverse delegation mismatch. And I
Mm,
do write about that because you should be able to see that. And I've seen the
mm,
takeover too many times. I don't like it. Uh, a good friend of mine has done it, and I give him free consulting now and tell him not to do that anymore because he'll
mm.
start to tell me a story about something, and I'm saying you're doing it again. So
Yeah.
it's these there are certain things that people just won't let go of,
Mm.
and
The other
and
one I've seen is where, senior leaders successfully delegate something and the thing happens, and then it's the body language and the tone, and they might sort of say to the person, well, that's not what I would have done, you know, and sending a really clear message that even though I let you do it and you've done it, that's not what I would have done. And it's by not necessarily
yeah,
saying it's wrong, but it's just, the body language, the tone, everything sort of just, I guess, conveys disappointment in that person. And I've seen that happen a couple of times too, and it's not very pretty to
yeah,
watch.
and it's really a shame because it might have been very successful. It's just that the CEO wouldn't have done it that way.
Exactly.
So
Your way isn't always the
it's
best way. Now,
but
you talk about learning.
there's too
Sorry, go
many
on.
there's so many ways to do the same thing,
Mm,
and you really don't know what the outcome is going to be until after it's done. So
mm,
anyway,
mm.
that's enough. Go ahead.
So you talk about learning speed, and you say that the best CEOs aren't the smartest necessarily. They're the ones who learn the fastest and act rapidly. So what actually enables that speed? So when you've seen it done really well, what's the driver behind it?
I'd say number one is knowing how to drive priorities and
Mhm.
make those trade-offs because they're good whiteboard speakers. They might have been flip chart speakers earlier in their career, maybe, but they're good whiteboard people. They can start even with a one-on-one, can do a whiteboard. You can bring in multiple people and develop the story and then get the priorities straight. And you do this as fast as possible. You learn as fast as possible, and then you take action. The problem is if you delay the action, things change
Mm,
and you don't have any living proof of what might work versus what might not work. If you take action, collect as much data as you can. I have a mini framework that I called guts plus data. It's GIPD, guts instinct plus data. You get as much data as you can. And today with AI, you can get a lot of data.
mm,
But a lot of people still make decision pure gut. It's a
mm,
gut feel. I'm not against either one of those. If you make pure gut decisions and pure data decisions, you're apt to make a mistake. If you combine them with the best available information and your best gut feel, and you have the priorities clearly laid out, you can start with your first actions on your first priorities. If you delay decisions, you have no idea what's going to happen and you can miss a market,
mm,
which there are multiple issues and examples I've written about there, especially in innovation. But you can miss something big time. If you get all that data fast, you use your guts and data that you collect, the best available data, and you make decisions and move forward as fast as possible, you can
mm,
still correct things. So that's why the fast learner has a process to be able to go through this type of a situation. It happens all the time in every company.
mm,
There are reasons you have to do it. It might be a competitor introduces something, and maybe they introduce something that's better than what you're working on.
mm,
Maybe they introduce something that now is exactly the same as you're delivering. Do you want to compete on price? I don't. You got to compete on value and solution. So that's why I really write about that. It's so easy for the CEO to make that mistake of, oh, I got to collect more data, you know, and then let's go and think about it for a few days. Think about it over the weekend. Come back on Monday. We'll talk about it. I don't. I mean, I'm not that I like to work 7 days a week, but a lot of times in my career, and I know CEOs who do this, will give homework assignments over the weekend, and they will come back on Monday. But he also might ask for something over the weekend. Give me your initial reaction to this on Saturday, because I'm going to be working on this on Saturday and Sunday. Those types of things can happen. I've seen acquisitions happen on a weekend. So you just have to, the fast learner and the fast decision making process. And again, I think guts plus data is the best way to do this. Is you got to have something, get the best available, then use your gut, and then move forward, and you do it as fast as possible. That is, to me, the shortcut to the right decision.
Mm. Do you find that people tend to overestimate how much information they need to make decisions?
100% every time.
Mm.
Yeah. I think it's consistent. I think we do it in real life, non-business related. People who study bank accounts, which bank account should I open? People who shop mortgages, people who shop. It happens in business and it happens in personal. So to me, it's just you got to create this methodology to combine your gut and some data, and then just make a decision and go.
Mm.
So you make the wrong decision, you adjust as fast as possible. That's another thing, is learn how to adjust. So that means you got to have weekly, daily, or weekly, depending on the importance and the scope of the project, checkpoints. Check back in tomorrow. The only time that I've ever had daily meetings is when we had a really tight deadline on something and we had no choice but to get a lot of stuff done every single day. Otherwise, weekly is typical, where you have a review on weeks every week. Now, I have this process to me that I write about in the book, and it's the mirror, what I call the mirror meeting. It's a reflection meeting that I have with myself every week. It's still on my calendar today, and I don't work full time in a company, except for the startup, which is just two of us. And but this is a meeting where you reflect on the previous week. What decisions did I not make that I should have made? What actions should I have taken that I didn't take? What should I do next week? Do I owe anybody anything? I've started this thing 40 years ago as an administrative day. Get caught up on phone calls and emails and anything that I owed anybody. Because I have chronological notebooks, so I always go through those, and that's what happens in those Friday meetings. No, to me, they're Friday. It doesn't matter what day you do it. But then you can do it before or after your weekly update with your team. And then you're better prepared. You're either better prepared for the meeting or for the next week. And to me, you've got to continuously move forward, continuous learning, continuous improvement. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a period of reflection that I think every single leader must have.
And that's that opportunity too to, review your decisions, think about, it's that thinking space. And I actually had a CEO client for a while who used to, whenever I went to see him, he'd just get me to sit there while he'd whiteboard and talk. And for a while there, I started to feel like I wasn't adding any value. I'm like, why am I even here? Like, all he does is just talk and whiteboard. And he said to me, if I don't pay somebody to come and sit with me, I'm never going to do it. And he said, it's the most valuable time that I have is actually to just get everything out of my head and plan things. And I thought that's really interesting that, just that people can be so busy that they actually can't structure their world to create thinking time unless they actually do something like that. And I think it's just, as we spoke earlier about the speed and the pace of business is insane.
So I have a client right now in the startup that is a business owner, an agency owner, and he is a hardcore diagnosed ADHD leader. And you'll find this with ADHD people, especially super bright ones.
Mm.
He told me one day in his office here, Minnesota, that he would pay somebody to sit across from him and remind him every 15 minutes what he needs to do. So he was looking for a tool. He couldn't find anything that was out there. So he uses Alexa.
Mm.
to remind him every 15 minutes to focus on what he's doing. It's a business owner
Mm.
who's building a business. He's in his third year, I think, and he's using the stuff that we built, which is around voice AI. And what's really interesting is that this is not uncommon.
Mm.
And there's more and more people that put right on their LinkedIn profile ADHD.
Mm.
I'm an ADHD leader, blah, blah, blah. They're different than everybody else. Now, to me, they're not as different because so many of them are ADHD.
Mm.
And if you look at my two books, I mentioned The Flyboy because he doesn't want to be identified by real name. People who know who he is from the books. But people who don't know him, he's hardcore ADHD. And when I was his number two, he used me for that type of a purpose. Keep me focused, Bill. Make sure that I don't drift. If I drift, you got to bring me back in because here's a guy who would call a big meeting of all the leadership team, and it's a big decision meeting for one thing or another. Could be a partner, it could be a customer, whatever it is. And he would take an incoming phone call. Doesn't matter who it is. And he would just get up and leave the meeting. It's his meeting.
Mm.
Don't do this. Just turn your phone off or something. Leave it outside. But you had to remind him. I had to continuously remind him. You got to stop doing that because you're losing respect of everybody in that meeting. They're all looking at their watch or their phones. Like, I got stuff to do. This isn't what I signed up for. So today it's even worse because people have Apple watches or Samsung watches and they're looking at their email, and it's you just have to learn how to deal with that and
Mm.
have process built in to how you do that. And that's one unique example that I've run into recently. This guy is probably the most hardcore of all the ADHD people I've ever worked with, where he wants a reminder every 15 minutes and he's considering hiring an assistant just for that. But
Mm.
Alexa so far is solving that problem for him.
Mm. I guess that's the smart way to do it, isn't it? To recognize that there's something that you need assistance with and putting plans in place to deal with it. It
Yeah.
shows that he's thinking about it.
Hmm.
Um, Now, you've said in the book too that the strongest CEOs don't just lead, they create leaders. So when you think about CEOs, particularly as we've been talking about startup CEOs and some of the challenges around delegation, what's the shift that the CEO has to make that happen?
Well, you brought it up. It's letting go. You have to build that trust. We've touched on it a little bit. You touched on it. I touched on it. If you have to make every decision and you don't delegate anything and you make sure that you have to sign everything from buying a pad of paper to all the coffee that you're going to bring in if it's in office or hybrid situation. If you have to make every single decision, then you're not going to get there and you're going to really upset a lot of people. So that's kind of what I see. It's the fine line of delegating with discipline versus just controlling everything. It really is. It really is a slippery slope.
Mm.
And being involved in every hire, I could see that for the first few people. But you hire an engineering head, then engineering is going to hire their people, or an operations head, and they're going to hire their people. You don't need to interview all these people.
Mm.
You can, but you don't need to. But come up with process that allows you to learn how to trust and verify. And I do write about that a little bit in the book. It's in this book. It's really important to be able to do that. And startups, especially today, where anybody can be a startup founder in the world of AI, because you can build a SaaS on a weekend that delivers a very specific feature that is underserved in the market, and then all of a sudden you are a CEO. And you may not need to hire a lot of people, but you have to use a lot of contractors. So you have to get the job done in scale. So you're still the CEO to all of those people. You have to have business process, you have to have compliance, you have to have operations, you have to have the operations person could be the HR person if you're doing a SaaS, for example, but you might want to have fractional people that do all this work. I think that is probably a more common from a small company startup perspective. The larger companies, I'm really better, even though I've worked in multi-billion dollar companies, and one of the CEOs that I feature in the first book and the second book, The Cyclone, is a CEO of a very large multinational division. And it's the same stuff that a startup has to deal with. It's just that there's a lot of people already in place. So that's the difference where a startup is building from scratch. And so you do make more decisions. But then you've got to, if you build that trust and verify from the get-go and you learn how to delegate with discipline, you're going to be successful. You really are. It increases your potential to be successful probably tenfold, if not 100-fold. That's just my opinion. And it's based on experience and what I see and what I feel and what I've experienced. There's no question that when you live it for 5.5 decades, you can see it.
Mm,
You can see
absolutely.
it, you can feel it, and then when you touch it, you can say, I told you so.
Mm,
Instead, I write about it.
yeah. Let's talk about tools because I really like the fact that you include a lot of tools and frameworks in the book. I think that's really helpful. So you talk about your 90-day realignment framework and you introduce those sort of fairly simple leadership disciplines. So why do these sort of simple structures have such big impact?
Simple is important, but it's not easy.
Mm,
Simple is not easy. I don't specifically say that, but so over the years, I've led small and large teams, and that was pre-CEO days. But I've been on the CEO's team, and so I know a little bit about both sides. So I've been in the man in the middle, and I've been all the other ones. The KISS method still is very, which people say, right, keep it simple, stupid, is still very applicable. And it's harder to do today in the world of AI because your your people, even if you don't have an AI policy, they're all doing shadow AI stuff. They're all using their own ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever it is they use. And they're probably putting your company in jeopardy by putting stuff out into LLMs. But if you keep your process and use simple frameworks, it gives you the ability to repeat process and adjust easily. Now, I guess easily might not be the right word, but adjust rapidly because you have a simple process that everybody on the team can understand. How many times have you coached a CEO where there's a lack of alignment by the management team? You could ask 5 to 10 people that are on the management team what is the number one priority of the company, not their group, but the company, and get 10 different answers. So if you have a simple framework for how all of this works, everybody can understand it, everybody can remember it, everybody can recite the top priorities, the biggest risks, the risk mitigations, what do you got, what's talked about at the staff meetings. Keep it simple, simple frameworks. I developed all of those frameworks that I've written about. I've given a couple of them new names, but specifically for the book, but I've used those. I think big frameworks are too hard.
mm,
McKinsey started with their 7S model way back in the 80s when I worked for Rockwell, and we implemented the McKinsey 7S model. And I just read about it somewhere on LinkedIn. Somebody else wrote about it thinking it was new. It's not new. it's it's decades old. Back to the 80s. That makes it 4.5 decades old. Trust me, I
mm,
implemented it. I was at the director level back then, but I remember all the meetings that we had at Rockwell It was a semiconductor products division, and we were pretty sizable. We were building products for the telecommunications division, so there was a lot of stuff going on. It was a multi-$100 million division, but implementing that model was not easy. It was and took training hours every week. And then even when you did the breakout meetings and did role plays of all the people, director level and up, directors, VPs, SVPs, etc., people just didn't get it. It took too long, too complex. So I learned back then to start to simplify everything. So I call them mini frameworks. If you have a mini framework, 6 steps, like I have a fast 6 for hiring, it's not that complex. It can be if you make it that way. And some of the CEOs are so bright, and they do come from the top schools, and these are the people that can read a book and comprehend 100% of it in no time. But that's not the average CEO. It just isn't. Average CEOs are intelligent, they're smart, they're clever, they're all kinds of different things. But if you make it too complex for everybody on your team, it's not going to work right. So the mini frameworks to me are so important, and they're there for everybody. I give away like small spreadsheets that people can customize. Uh, some people call them templates. I call them mini frameworks because they work. You can customize it for yourself, make it simple. And I do hope that people can use some of those things. Now, I've gotten some feedback from people that have read my book, connected to me on LinkedIn, and start talking to me. And some of the people give me great feedback on some of this stuff, and that makes my day. If you really write it for one person, if you can improve one person's life, then you're successful. It's not about making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and maybe it is for some, but it's not for me. So if I can change one person's life for the better, I'm very happy. And to get feedback from people that say, I used your book to teach my son how to build a business. And this was a guy from Hong Kong. So it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with that kind of an approach. And you can take a look at my book with all the different stories of reality, and you can learn everything from starting a company and picking a co-founder to launching a company and not making super strategic mistakes. And so I'm very happy about that type of an approach. And frameworks really give you some guidance on how to eliminate mistakes that I know you make if you don't have a mini framework. So that's why it's so important to me.
I really like that because as you said, there are some CEOs that can hold an incredible level of complexity in their head and they can broad scan and see the entire picture. But then how do they break that down into understandable chunks that they can then teach other people or they can explain to other people? And you do find that some people can be so complex in their thinking that no one can follow them. And that then creates that CEO bottleneck again because they're the only person who understands the strategy. So having tools and frameworks to chunk that information down into smaller parts that can be understood, but also parts that can be executed as well. I think that's an incredibly important thing. So if you've got a CEO listening to this and they could identify just one blind spot today that would change how they lead, where should they start?
Hmm. Okay, I would probably say take a look at your decision process first and even ask your most trusted people on your team about your decision process. How do people see it? How do people react to it? And do they have any suggestions? And then listen. Because and process it when you listen, because there's great feedback if you give people the opportunity and the safe space in which to do that. And I am a firm believer in that. I think that um, I do think that the discipline of how you make decisions are critical to everything from integrity to desired outcomes. I mean, it covers the gambit, but people might tell you that, yeah, you make the decisions, but it looks like you know, you're a dictator, you're authoritarian, and we don't like that. And even if you ask team a question at a staff meeting, you still go and do whatever you want. Why don't you try implementing something or modifying something with other people's input? It's all part of the culture that you do build as a CEO. I would start with a decision process, I think, first. You know, we all have an automatic decision process based on the complexity of the decision you have to make. It's kind of like driving your car and coming up to an intersection with a red light or a four-way stop sign. You know you have to stop, you start to pump the brakes and you do it. But when you don't have those guardrails in place, you just you all have a we all have a decision process. We all have this. We look at things, we look for three or four things, and then we make a decision. Now sometimes that's fine because it's real simple. But when you start talking about a company where the decision you make can take the company down, when you talk to people, that's why I say listen, they can see your blind spots better than you can. And, you know, I write all the way through the book. It's a blind spot when you give up signature authority. It's a blind spot when you fail to delegate properly or you micromanage. Every one of these is a blind spots, and you don't think they are. That's probably the biggest failure for some CEOs is they don't even know a blind spot exists,
Mm.
and they don't think about it because they think they know everything, and you already know people like that. So, but that's probably how I would recommend it to CEOs who are listening. And believe me, it's not just first-time CEOs or founders. It's people that are stuck. And it happens. I've seen it happen over and over again. Yeah, the board might keep you in place. Maybe you started the company 15 years ago and you're still running it, but revenue's flat and the channel's still selling, but customers are churning. And, you know, there's a high churn rate among your employees. And you might have to lay off because now of AI or whatever it is. And if you don't take the time to understand a little bit about your decision process and where your blind spots might be, you can't fix them. So that's kind of where I'd start.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, that's been really interesting. I really appreciate your time. So the book is here, What Every CEO Must Know. We'll put a link to the book below the video, wherever you're watching it. So thanks very much, Bill. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much.